Well, I guess the feminists were wrong. And I mean that somewhat facetiously. The problem I see with the modern feminist movement is that everybody thinks they have it worse than everybody else, okay? And obviously I don't mean everybody, I'm just saying, you got these activists saying, you know, the patriarchy, men are in charge, men have all these good things. And the reality is, life is pros and cons. Some people have some things, some people have other things. It's not, people aren't equal. No matter what, people won't be equal. And I'll just say this before we read this. Basically, a study was done showing that men actually face more discrimination around the world. But the point is, there will always be inequality between men and women. Plain and simple. And I've talked about this before. And it's because men and women are biologically different. I know that can be controversial, but men tend to have more muscle mass. Their bones are much more dense, tend to be taller. And that affords them a certain advantage. Guys can typically run faster, farther, and be more successful in physical activities. And then you have the fact that women have to bear children. Right? Well, they don't have to, but they do. And that's a different body, and that means there's always going to be some inequity that cannot be fixed, unless I guess everyone starts taking, chemicals and, doing some weird science type thing. But anyway, let's read the story about what's going on here from the Daily Mail, which admittedly I'm not a big fan of, but we'll read this anyway because I do have the actual study pulled up, so we'll read through this article. Men face more discrimination than women. Global study claims males receive the raw end of the deal with harsher punishments for the same crime, compulsory military service, and more deaths at work, which is true. Women are better off in more countries than men are, a new study has found. A method that assesses the forms of hardship and discrimination facing men and women has revealed males have it harder in 91 countries out of 134. Women were disadvantaged in only 43. The study looked at 6.8 billion people around the world, and scientists developed a new way of measuring gender inequality. The UK and the US and Australia all discriminate against men more, whereas Italy, Israel, and China are harder environments for women, according to the study. Researchers say this is due to men receiving harsher punishments for the same crime, compulsory military service, and more occupational deaths than women. The study was carried out by the University of Essex and the University of Missouri, Columbia, and published in the journal PLOS One. Scientists created a database which deciphers a nation's discrimination called the Basic Index of Gender Inequality, BIGI. The closer the BIGI score is to 0, the greater the level of equality is in the country. 0 is a perfect score, indicating absolute parity between genders. Italy came the closest with a score of 0.00021, slightly favoring males. The top-ranked nation to favor women over men is claimed to be Saudi Arabia. Wait, what? With a score of negative 0.001554. That seems wrong? Women are favored over men in Saudi Arabia? I guess to a certain extent, but I don't know about that. If it is a negative number, it indicates females are better off, and if the BIGI score is positive, it shows males are less discriminated against. I gotta stop right there and say, I don't think it's true that women have it better in Saudi Arabia. I guess the thing we have to look at is that it's multivariate, right? Maybe out of 10 areas, women have all these advantages, and then in other areas, women don't. And I guess if you do it that way, you could probably say that. But when it comes to like civil rights, yeah, women don't really have that in Saudi Arabia. They say, for example, Guatemala and Albania came in as the 17th and 18th ranked countries, respectively, for equality, and had a BIGI score a similar distance from 0. However, Guatemala is a far better environment for men with a score of 0.012198, whereas Albania is better for women with 0.012889. The index is based on 3 factors: educational opportunities, healthy life expectancy, and overall life satisfaction. A measure called the Global Gender Gap Index has been used as the yardstick for analyzing inequality since its inception in 2006. It became one of the most widely used measures of national gender inequality, used by academics and policymakers across the world. Researchers have recently grown wary of the index and claim it does not measure issues where men are at a disadvantage. Professor Stoute also believes the complexity of the Global Gender Gap Index makes it difficult to distinguish whether gender differences are the result of social inequalities or personal preference. The simpler BIGI method, he says, is a much sounder alternative. He said, no existing measure of gender inequality fully captures the hardships that are disproportionately experienced by men in many countries, and so they do not fully capture the extent to which any specific country is promoting the well-being of all its citizens. The BIGI provides a much simpler way of tackling gender inequality, and it focuses on aspects of life that are directly relevant to all people. Used alongside other existing indicators, it provides additional and different information to give a more complete assessment of gender equality, making it easier for policymakers to introduce changes to improve the quality of life for both men and women. I have to also disagree. Based on what they're saying about Saudi Arabia, it seems like they don't look at the nuances of what areas might be more important than others, and thus I don't think that's going to help anyone. They say almost 8 in 10 firms pay men more. Percentage of firms who have declared. So they say 78% pay men more, 14% pay women more, and 8% pay men and women the same. I don't know what this has to do necessarily with the study. They included the graphic. Researchers found the most developed countries in the world come closest to achieving true gender equality, but there was a slight advantage for women. Oh my. Inequality was more significant in the least developed countries, with Chad the lowest ranked nation. Women in these nations are at a more significant disadvantage than men in the more developed nations where women have the edge. The authors of the research say the difficulties faced by women in developing regions is predominantly due to fewer opportunities to get a good education. There are an equal amount of nations with medium-level development that see men and women falling behind. Researchers say men's disadvantage is largely due to a shorter, healthy lifespan. Professor David Geary from the Department of Psychological Sciences at the University of Missouri in the United States added, "We sought to correct the bias towards women issues within existing measures and at the same time develop a simple measure that is useful in any country in the world regardless of their level of economic development." I guess that's fair to say when you talk about the broad spectrum of life expectancy, because if you're not alive, well, that's probably the worst discrimination you could face. And with men being forced to go into war, that probably is much worse. So maybe that's where Saudi Arabia actually does make sense. Young men who are, they go into religion, they all basically have this religious indoctrination. But if you have to go into war and then you die, women technically do have it better. Now, admittedly, I think they all have it worse than we do. I think compulsory military service is wrong for the most part. I understand, like World War II, it's like, the Nazis, maybe you do need some kind of compulsory service because sometimes these things happen. But when it comes to a country like Saudi Arabia, if you have all of this inequality faced by women, and it's overwhelmingly, it's disproportionately affecting women, but men have to go off and die, and then do die at a really young age, women are still, in a sense, better off, right? I think that's something that's missed by a lot of mainstream feminists here in the West. They don't understand that men die all the time. And there's that one quote, I don't know if it's a real quote, but it was something like, Hillary Clinton said, "Women are the true victims of war because they lose their sons, their brothers, and their fathers," and something like that, or their husbands. And a lot of people mocked this. Again, I don't know if that's a real quote, but I remember seeing it go around a little while. They mocked it because the true victims are the people who were killed. Not you because you're sad about it. Dying is worse than being sad. But I guess the argument is you can't be sad because you're dead, so you won't care, and therefore true suffering only exists in life. But anyway, I think the whole thing's silly, right? So anyway, let's read on. The university, they have this segment on pay gap, but I'm not going to read it. The University of Essex, which performed the research, made headlines in 2016 when it gave female staff a one-off pay raise in order to close the gender pay gap. It moved female professors up three newly created pay levels to raise their average salaries to the same as their male counterparts. Professor Stote added, "We're not saying that women in highly developed countries are not experiencing disadvantages in some aspect of their lives. What we're saying is that an ideal measure of gender equality is not biased to the disadvantages of either gender." Oh, that's a really good point. Doing so, we find a different picture to the one commonly presented in media. So, number one is Italy. Men are slightly better off, but it's extremely tiny. Israel is number two, and it's only slightly, it's 3 times worse than Italy, but that's still really low. And then actually, they said, this is funny, Saudi Arabia is number 3, saying that women are better off than men in Saudi Arabia. That's crazy. And Azerbaijan, also pretty crazy. But I guess it goes back to the thing about, being forced to go and fight in a war and then dying, things like that. Look at this. Even Bahrain, it's number 12. Where's the United States? Oh man, look at this. Iran, 57. Okay, but did I miss where's the US? Let's keep going. We got Lithuania at 77. Korea, 78, favoring females. Wow, it looks like gender inequality favors women to a rather extreme degree in the United States. What is the United States not even in here? Let's see if we can find the United States. The United States, nope, that would make sense. I don't think the United States was even in there. They say, they were in the U.S. Oh, here we go. I just zoomed right past it. 61. All right, this is fantastic. In the United States, we are ranked 61, benefiting females. Oh, that can't be right. How can that be true? That women are better off in the United States to a rather extreme degree, 0.03. That's really high. In fact, Spain is ranked higher than we are. Who else is ranked higher? The United Arab Emirates is ranked better than we are. That's crazy. And it's all favoring women. And then we have, Malta, Switzerland, Bahrain, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, all of these ranking higher than the U.S. So I'll end by saying this. Who am I to deny science? Admittedly, it's a specific science, it's one study. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all true, but I think it's interesting how they try to quantify this. So here's what I can say. Men have some things better than women. Women have some things better than men. According to the study, it's better for women. What does that mean? I guess it means that women are the majority, and they're the ones with the most privilege, therefore men are the oppressed minority. Hey, it's science. There you go. Study proves it. Now, let's be real, though. One study doesn't mean that much. It's interesting data. Take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's fascinating to see. And, yeah, stick around. More videos to come.